Hi, in today's video I'm going to be covering installing Haskell libraries using Cabal on Freebsd. And the reason I came across this was because I use xmonad on Freebsd, and it requires, well, it doesn't require, but you can use a Haskell library called xmonad-contrib to add extra features to xmonad. And the problem is that when I did an update on Freebsd, the xmonad-contrib package had been removed, as well as a lot of the other Haskell libraries. And I posted a post on the Freebsd forum about this, and I actually came across the solution myself. And this is basically that you have to manually install the Haskell libraries now. So what I'll do is I'll switch across to the Freebsd machine. I'll just switch across here. And basically what I found was you got to do this manually. So I'm going to go through the steps. So first of all, what we need to do is actually install the packages to build everything. So I'm using DOAS here to install the packages. So you may be using sudo, but we need to install xmonad, ghc, hsstack, hscabal install, and that allows us to install packages with Cabal. We then need libxft, and that's basically a font library that xmonad-contrib requires. So you need to install that and pass a special flag when you're building the xmonad-contrib libraries. The other thing that we need to install is, if I just come across here, is pkg-conf. And this is basically needed because we're going to be building libxft, and it requires pkg-conf to actually build the packages. And lastly, the two things we're going to install are tint2 and Rofi, which is a panel and an application launcher. So the first step is that we're going to edit our shell configuration file and add a path to the Cabal bin directory, which will be created later on. So basically, you edit your shell config file, and we add this chunk of code which checks if the Cabal bin directory exists, and then if it does, it appends it to our shell path. And then we would source our shell configuration file, which in this case, in my case, is the ZSH shell. But if you're using bash or something else, you'd source that shell after adding the code to your config file. The next step, what we need to do is we need to run cabal update. And what this does is it downloads a list of packages from Haskell so that we can install them with the cabal command. So we run cabal update in the terminal, and so that will take a second or two to download the list of packages. And then once it's done, once it's completed that, what we need to do is install the xmonad-contrib library with with Cabal, and it doesn't actually have an executable in it. It's just a library, so that's why we passed the --lib flag, lib option rather. And at the end, what we need to do is use --flags equals -use_xft, and again that's the libxft library that we installed that's required by xmonad-contrib. So after we've done that, what we're going to do is we need to create the xmonad directory in our home directory. So we do that with mkdir-p ~/.xmonad. Now you can install xmonad so that it follows the XDG configuration specifications, so that it'd be installed in .config xmonad. And I was doing that previously, but the way we build this with Cabal, it's got some scripter build scripts and stuff, and in there it specifies this is the directory that is going to build everything in. You could change the configuration files to point somewhere else, but I'm just using the sort of defaults to make things easier. So after we've created the xmonad directory, the next step is what we need to do is rename our existing xmonad configuration file from xmonad.hs to config.hs. And the reason for that is in one of these build files for Cabal that we're going to be using is that's the name that is it's expecting. You could change the configuration, the Cabal configuration file to use a different name, but I'm just keeping this nice and simple so we don't have to change too much stuff. So first of all, I said we rename the xmonad config to config.hs. And then we're going to copy the configuration config.hs file to the xmonad directory that we created in the previous step. So we do mv config.hs ~/.xmonad, and that's basically going to move that file into that directory. Now, once we've done that, what we need to do is copy the build and xmonad config cabal files to the xmonad directory, and basically there is a default build file and xmonad config cabal file installed on the system after you've installed the packages. And what we do is we copy those to we copy the build file here, the user local share examples xmonad build, and we're going to copy that to our home directory xmonad build. And the next file that we're going to copy across is user local share examples xmonad config cabal, and we're going to copy that across to the xmonad directory xmonad config.cabal. So once we've got those build files in place, what we need to do is we need to edit the xmonad config.cabal file, because what I found is I'm using particular libraries in xmonad from xmonad-contrib, and when I tried building at this stage, it threw an error and said that what I need to do is add the containers to the build depends. So what we're going to do is, using your text editor of choice, we're going to edit the .xmonad config.cabal file. So that's in our home directory, in the xmonad directory we created. And this is the configuration file here that we copied from the default in the previous section. So down here you'll see this build depends, and by default it just says base xmonad-contrib. So what we do is we append comma containers to the xmonad Freebsd cabal file, whatever it was called. Let me just check what it was called. Yeah, xmonad config cabal. And once we've done that, we can run cabal new update. So what I did was, just to make sure, might not be needed, but I made sure I was in the xmonad directory. Excuse me. And then I ran cabal new update, and what that does is that goes back and re-downloads all the Haskell packages. It sort of runs again for a second. Now, after we've done that, we can then build the xmonad-contrib libraries. So what we do is we just run this tilde/.xmonad build, and that takes a couple of minutes. On my old system, MacBook Air 2011 with 4 gig of RAM, it took maybe 4 or 5 minutes or something to build it. Once we've done that, we'll have xmonad and all the libraries installed in the right place. But the last thing we need to do is actually set up our xinitrc file. So first of all, what I'm doing is I'm using Fay to set the background of the desktop background, the wallpaper. And this is an option for xmonad here, xset_root, and this basically changes the cursor to a more traditional pointing sort of cursor, because I think by default it's an X. That's right. I think, yeah, in xmonad by default you get a big X for the cursor. So that's how we set the cursor. And then finally, what we do is we start the shush agent and the window manager. And you may not want to start your SSH agent this way, but this is the way I always do it. I start the shush agent and xmonad so that there's only one instance of the shush agent running. So we run exec the shush agent and the path2 xmonad, so that basically when we log in, we run startx, it's going to come up with xmonad. And let me just switch across. You can see xmonad here and the Rofi file launcher, and all the system tray, all the icons for the different windows. So I can switch across like that. And basically that's how I managed to get xmonad working again. So if I come across to here, you'll see the xmonad directory. I've got the build file that I copied, and the config.hs, which is the xmonad configuration file, and the xmonad config.cabal file, which is where we had to specify the containers option. So I can basically come across to, let me just come across, open up Firefox. I'll just come across to the my GitHub repository, and Freebsd.files. I should have xmonad in here. Yeah, xmonad. And so here's the config.hs file. There's just one thing I wanted to show you is actually launching. So I can increase the size of that a bit. Okay, so the other thing that you want to do is actually launch Tint2, and basically you do this in your startup hook in your config.hs file, your xmonad configuration file, and this is the path to Tint2 on FreeBSD, user local bin Tint2, and then we use the -c option and the path to our Tint2 configuration file. And I did a video about setting up xmonad with Tint2, but this is how you launch the Tint2 panel. So you've got all the windows up here, all the workspaces, and then you've got your system tray here and clock. So that's basically how I got xmonad-contrib working again with cabal, what I'll do is let me just switch back and I'll show you the documentation. So if I just come across to my GitHub repository and scroll down to xmonad. Yep. Xmonad Freebsd cabal .org, and these are all the notes that I've been showing you in Emacs. These are all the steps that I had to go through to get everything working, get cabal working, stop all the errors by adding containers to the build depends option down here, building xmonad and setting up the xinitrc. So those are all the steps I had to go through to get this working again. And basically what happened was, as I say, when I did an update, I couldn't launch into xmonad because I had no xmonad-contrib. So that's where DWM actually came in handy, because I could just build my DWM without even starting X. So basically what I did was I couldn't log in. So I built DWM, changed my xinitrc, start X, and I got into DWM so that I had a desktop environment, and then spent some time figuring out how to get xmonad working again. And those are all the steps that I went through to get it working again. And one final thing is I'm actually using ffmpeg to stream from Freebsd to a Windows machine running OBS Studio. And what I'm doing is I'm using a VLC source in OBS Studio and set to UDP://@:6881, which is the port. I've got some documentation on this, but basically I can't get the NDI plugin working on FreeBSD, which requires the NDI runtime library, which is Linux only. So I haven't figured that out. So what I'm doing instead is using ffmpeg to stream the desktop to the IP address of the Windows machine over UDP, and then using OBS Studio with the VLC source and putting in the UDP link and setting the network caching to about the lowest it will go, which is about 100, and that switches with a delay of about less than a second. So there we go. It's about less than a second behind, but that's how I'm using ffmpeg to stream FreeBSD to a Windows machine, and using OBS Studio to bring that in with about a second delay between the two. So those are all the steps that I had to go through in this document. Let me go back up to the top. So this document here that I've been going through showing you is the same one here on GitHub. So all the steps that I've just been going through in Emacs, the notes are on GitHub so that you can actually follow along and get xmonad-contrib working again on FreeBSD. And this should apply to all Haskell libraries that you want to install on FreeBSD, because if I just come across to the terminal and do pkg search xmonad, you'll see we have xmonad listed here, but no xmonad-contrib. So if I do pkg search hs dash, these are all the Haskell libraries that are still available. So you've got xmobart and xmonad, but you've got no xmonad-contrib because the package has been removed because they're switching to doing it a different way, basically. So you can actually manually install stuff with Cabal so that you can actually install Haskell libraries on Freebsd, and those are all the steps I went through and some of the gotchas that I came across. Like, for example, the package pkg-config. I thought that was perhaps the pkg tool in FreeBSD, but it's not. It's a separate package that you need to install. And basically you install, as I say, you install all these packages: HS, xmonad-contrib, GHC, HS stack. The HS Cabal install is the actual tool that allows you to use Cabal to install Haskell libraries. And basically then you have to add it to your bin, do the update, then install the Haskell library that you want, which was in our case xmonad-contrib. And basically you have the build files that you copy across, these ones, the build and the xmonad config cabal file that you have to copy across into your xmonad directory. And you add that, you edit the xmonad config cabal file, add the containers, line to the build dependencies, and then you run cabal update, and then you can run the build script, and it will build all the libraries. And then once you've set up xinitrc, log in again, start x, and you'll have xmonad working again. And see if I can just demo that. So switch there. So I find that's much nicer than just the plain DWM. I was really missing xmonad, and you can do stuff like have your drop-down terminal. So it's much nicer than plain DWM, much more productive, and this is how you get it working again. And the other thing that was I came across, which was interesting again, was streaming using ffmpeg to another machine. And let me just come across, because I've got the documentation about that. So if I come into the GitHub repository here and come across to OBS Studio, HHHJKLM, yep, OBS Studio. OBS UDP. Okay. So this is some of the options that I was using. This is for sending an ffmpeg stream to a specific IP address on the network. And what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing my desktop here, which is 1366 by 768, and then I'm streaming it to this IP address with this port. You can also multicast, and basically what multicasting is it sends one stream to this address, which then all the devices on the network can tune into at once. So this allows you to stream to all the devices on your network at once. And then these are the options I was using if I had a second display set up. So if I had a second display plugged into this laptop, which was at 1920 by 1080, I can use ffmpeg to capture that second display by putting in the offset of my laptop display, which was 1366. So that bit of code would actually stream the display attached rather than the laptop screen. And then you can use MPV or VLC to receive the machine on the other machine on the network. So with MPV, it would be MPV UDP : / 127.0.0.0.1, and then the port that you've used. With VLC, what I found is what you have to do is omit the 127 IP address and put in the @ symbol, like the symbol that you'd use for an email address. So the address in VLC would actually be let me just copy this across. I'll just come across to a scratch pad. Oops. So oh, bugger. So in VLC, that would be the top one would be what you'd be using for MPV, but for VLC, what you do is use @. So on the receiving machine, like for instance in my case here, I'm receiving the stream on OBS Studio on Windows, and I'm using the VLC source as opposed to the media source, because the VLC source lets you put the caching down to 100 milliseconds, and the media source uses like 1 or 2 meg. The caching and the delay was a lot bigger on the media source than using VLC. But on OBS Studio VLC source, what you do is you put in the you wouldn't put in the VLC, obviously. You just put in this address, UDP : / @:6881, which is the port I was actually using to send the stream on. So, for instance, here, this one here. So if this was the IP address of the Windows machine, I'm using 6881. And then in the VLC source on OBS Studio, what you do is add in the address, which would be UDP : / @6881, and then that picks up the stream in OBS Studio. And this is a good workaround if you can't get the NDI plugin working on your version of OBS. Your version of OBS Studio is too old, or like me, I'm running Freebsd here, and I can't get the NDI runtime working. So using using ffmpeg to stream is a good workaround. And the other thing that I want to look at is if you can actually use this ffmpeg command I'm using in OBS Studio, so that you could set stream on OBS Studio and use ffmpeg to stream to another machine. But that's getting sidetracked by what I was going on about, which was getting the xmonad-contrib files working on FreeBSD with the cabal install. And again, you just come back here. I've got all the notes down here, down at the bottom. So those are all the notes that I had to go through to get everything working. And then once you've done that, you have the xmonad-contrib libraries working, and you won't have to update them because, I don't think most of them have been updated in the last 10 years or something. So once you've done once you set all this up, you're not going to have to update xmonad or xmonad-contrib. It'll be set, for eternity pretty much. You can carry on using your config, hopefully without any issues, and you can use this method to install any Haskell libraries using Cabal on Freebsd, because they've been a lot of the Haskell libraries have been removed from the ports and packages. So this is how you can get around that and manually install everything yourself. So that's getting xmonad and xmonad-contrib working with all the nice Tint2 panel, system tray, application launcher, all working again. So I find that's much nicer than just plain DWM and D menu. It's a lot more productive. So it took me a while to figure this out, and those were all the steps that I had to go through to get it working again.